Um, but yeah, thank you guys. Can I pray before we get started? I know you guys are eating. I'm so sorry. Father God, we thank you, Lord, that you are God and you love every single one of us, Lord, in our brokenness, whether it be physical, mental, but especially when we're spiritually broken, you love us anyway, God. And you've sent your Son to heal and to make us whole and to reconcile us back to you. So I pray that as we just continue to have this ongoing conversation, we as a church would be better at loving your people the way you love every single one of us. So we thank you, God. It's in your Son's name we pray. Amen. All right. So I have a PowerPoint that I'll be going through together. And let me see. Is it? Oh, there we go. All right. So, yes. I'll be talking about welcoming students with special needs into our church while that gets loaded. And as a counselor working in the Alhambra Unified School District, I'll be quite honest with you, I don't work specially with students with special needs. It's more like I work with all the students, but then every once in a while I'll have students who come by with special needs, and that is my experience with them. But I want to start with a comic, if you can read it. It goes up and down, not left to right, but it starts with on the fox and the elephant. The fox wants to share something, but he says it's a long story. The elephant says, I'm all ears. Yes. Because we all need somebody to listen to us, right? And then on the right side, it's a fox and a flower is drooping and says, isn't the world unkind? And the fox waters the flower and says, that's why every kindness matters. And, every small drop of kindness to our kids matters, and that's kind of going to be the scope of what I'm trying to get at today. So there's 3 different perspectives on disabilities that have existed, I think, throughout the years. Actually, there's more probably, but just right now, there's the modernist perspective. This is philosophical stuff, right? The modernist perspective says that disability is an abnormal thing in our normal world. So our world is normal, but if somebody is disabled, if they have a disability or a disorder, that's not normal. A postmodernist perspective says a disability is a normal thing in our normal world. This is just part of life. And so disability is just a part of our normal world. But then there's our biblical perspective, that disability is a normal thing in our abnormal world. In our sinful and fallen world, this is where disability comes about and it becomes normal. And so how do we address it? First, I think we need to develop a theology of disability. What I mean by that is we need to talk about it as a church and how we understand disability in light of God and who we are in light of God. And so first, today's theme verse from Psalm chapter 139, we need to teach that all people are fearfully and wonderfully made. I think sometimes we forget or we have it in us. I think in Korean, we say somebody's 모자라, right? That implies that something falls short, right? But we all fall short. We're all 모자라 in some way. But then even in our language, it comes out like that. There's an example of David. Whenever we preach about David, it's always about David and Goliath, and David and Bathsheba, and maybe David and Jonathan. But nobody talks about David and Mephibosheth. And I don't even know if some of you guys know who Mephibosheth is, but he is Jonathan's son. He becomes crippled because he's running away in battle, or like there's something happening, breaks his legs. But David invites him and honors him to the dinner table, to the banquet, always, right? And so we need to preach about these things. Jesus addresses disability all the time. He heals people, but he has this conversation directly with a man, or about a man who's blind. The disciples ask Jesus, right, is this guy blind because he sinned or because his parents sinned, right? And Jesus says, neither. It's not his fault or his parents' fault. It's so that the glory of God might be displayed in him and through him. So we need to teach as a church that special needs is an expected reality in our fallen world, yes, but also that God values all human life, and all of human life is made in God's image. This is what we need to teach consistently as a church from the pulpit, and an attitude we need to carry throughout. Second, we need to actually believe that, right? We need to actually believe that every part of Christ's body is necessary, right? In the book of 1 Corinthians, Paul likens the church to a body with different body parts. But sometimes we look at certain ministries or certain students and we try to exclude them because it's a little bit of extra work for us to include them. But we actually need to believe what we say and what we preach, and believe that everybody has a role to play. And there's a lot of words on the screen, but I'm just going to read the last verse from 1 Corinthians 12:21-26. It says, if one member suffers, all suffer together. If one member is honored, all rejoice together. And that's kind of the attitude we should have. Instead of saying, Jubilee ministry is like this, or these students are like that in our ministry, let's be with them. Let's suffer with them. Let's glorify. Let's bring them up, right? Then we ourselves will be brought up as well. And so we need to actually believe what we teach and actually have that mentality, right? And this is going to be hard. This isn't it just because we have one conversation like this. It's all fixed, right? Yes, we're going to leave and we're going to believe this is true, right? This is something that's going to be ongoing as we continue to teach and converse, right? And finally, this is where I'm going to spend the bulk of our time. Grow in accessibility. Invite people to events, people who have disabilities, who have special needs. Allow everyone to participate in every activity at church. And I've been at Chungyeon for about a year, and I don't think this is really a problem. But when it comes to small groups, VBS retreats, invite everyone, right? Don't say you can't come because of X, Y, and Z, because of a disability or whatnot. This might require more money. This might require more volunteers. But I think it's an opportunity to trust in God, and it's an opportunity for us to grow as a church. And then finally, learn and be trained in how to better serve families and children with special needs, which is what we're doing right now. To me, this is incredible that we're having a conversation like this to begin with, because I don't know how many churches are, to be quite honest. And so to have a day dedicated to something like this, to me, speaks volumes. But like Pastor Anthony was saying, just because we do it once doesn't mean we're done, right? This is an ongoing conversation we need to have. So I'm going to talk about two special needs in particular that are probably the most present at schools and probably at church, and that's ADHD and autism. And then how we can help students with ADHD and with autism. So I will share this PowerPoint with you if you really want to read it. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but what it looks like, I think we kind of have an idea of what ADHD is, right? There's that kid who in sermon time who never listens, who's always playing with something, or who's always running out. And that's basically what it is. They're impulsive. They have poor inhibition. That means if they think of something, they have to do it. They take unnecessary risks. They take things without permission, and when it comes to like schoolwork, they take shortcuts that leads to mistakes. I have a kid at my school, first grader. If class is boring, he runs out of the classroom, and a couple of times he tried to climb our fence, and I had to like bring him down. A lot of fun. I love that kid, but I wear my running shoes every day, right? So it's stuff like that. He knows the rules. I think sometimes when we look at these kids, they're like, oh, why don't you just follow the rules? They know what the rules are. They know they're breaking it, but they do it anyway. And we'll talk a little, right after this slide, why they do that. But then this also, when you're conversing with them, they cut you off, right? They don't finish, they don't wait for you to finish what you're saying, but they just have to say whatever's on their mind right away. They can't, all of us probably have a hard time delaying gratification nowadays, where we have to wait for something if we want it. But for students with ADHD, it's even more difficult. And they're hyperactive, right? They're more active than other peers. So if you're at a retreat game, like let's say you're at retreat or VBS, and the kids are jumping up and down, and everyone's like having a good old time, everyone's screaming and shouting and doing all of that, it's hard to pinpoint a student with ADHD, even if he might be more hyperactive than everyone else. But here, right now, when it's quiet like this, and a student is loud or being distracted or distracting to others, then it's the hyperactivity it's also dependent on the environment, right? If it's appropriate for the environment, then it might not be ADHD. It just might just be excitement, right? And here's why it happens. The brains of students with ADHD, do you guys know what dopamine is? Dopamine? It's the chemical that produces happiness, right, in us. Students with ADHD, their brains cannot regulate that. They don't know how to, their brains don't produce it well. They can't, and if they do produce it, their brains are less receptive to the uptake of dopamine. So, in order to receive that dopamine hit, they need to do something about it. The body, the brain tells them, you need to do this. So here, we're all like, okay, so even though I might be boring or whatnot, you guys can still regulate that, right? Students with ADHD, they cannot. This guy is boring, oh my gosh, like I need a hit of dopamine, I'm gonna run outside, right? I'm gonna flip a table, right? I'm gonna do whatever it takes for me to get a little bit of dopamine to make me happier, right? And so they will do whatever they want, preferred activities. Sometimes it could be small things like completing a task. Getting into an argument with the other person produces dopamine for us. And then risky or dangerous behaviors. These are the symptoms of ADHD. And again, they understand the rules, but because of this inability to regulate this dopamine, they violate the rules. Because at that point, the rules go out the window. They don't care because their body needs to produce this, right? So because their bodies are so focused on making dopamine, when other students are working or when other students are getting up to get in line to go to recess or whatever, students will miss that. They can't pick up on these environmental cues that other people are doing because their brains are so, it's running so fast. They're also developing at 70% of what would be expected at that age level. So they tend to look a little bit more immature than other students. They prefer toys and games that are younger than what might be considered age appropriate at that time. And so that's why ADHD happens. Next, I'll talk a little bit about autism, and then we'll go into the practicalities of how we can serve these two groups of students. Do you guys, anybody know what IDEA stands for? IDEA? Christy's nodding. School psych. What is it? It is a law. She doesn't know? That's a lie. IDEA stands for Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And it's a law from the government, I think it was 1972. Basically, all students, regardless of disability, need to have an education. They need to be provided an education. And under that act, they define certain disabilities, and autism is one of them. And it means a developmentally disability that significantly affects verbal and nonverbal communication, so social aspect and social interaction, and it's generally evident before age 3. And as part of the education, it needs to impact their educational performance. Other characteristics associated with autism are engagement in repetitive activities, so doing the same thing over and over and over again. That's called stimming or stereotyped movements. Resistance to environmental changes or changes in daily routine. So they need structure, they like structure, but if that structure breaks, then they go off the rails, right? They throw a tantrum, right? And they have unusual responses to sensory experiences. This is the DSM-5 criteria for the autism spectrum disorder. These just in a nutshell. It's actually much more extensive than this, but it's the social communication and social interaction aspect that they look for. They have a hard time going back and forth in conversations, reduced sharing, and failure to initiate or respond in social interactions. Nonverbal, really hard time with eye contact, with picking up on body language, with facial expressions, and then they have deficits in maintaining and understanding relationships. And then, that's ADHD happening right there at that table, right? A second part of autism, that's not just the social interactive part, restricted and repetitive patterns of behavior, interests, or activities. So they do the same motions over and over again. Sometimes we see flapping like that. Sometimes it could be hitting themselves. They are insistent on everything being the same. They like routine. Sometimes they get really fixated on certain interests. Basketball, cars, trucks, whatever it might be. And then they are hyperactive to sensory inputs or unusual in sensory aspects of the environment. So like, for example, when it comes to many of us, sitting here in this room with the lighting like this, I prefer the room to be a little bit brighter, but I can live with it, right? But for students with autism, if this sensory might not be enough. They want that extra lighting, so they have to stimulate themselves somehow to receive this input that they want, right? Or if the music's too loud somewhere, they like to cover their ears, right? Stuff like that. So the way a church is traditionally constructed, it can be very difficult for a person with autism because of the changes in lighting, the changes in sound and music. It can be too much sensory stimulation, right? Here's some numbers by autism. 1 in 54 children have been identified with autism. That probably means there's at least one in every ministry in the education department that has autism. That's based on data in 2016. And in 2022, 3.49% of people with autism. And I think a common question is like, is autism something we're just identifying much more now? Or are there actually more people with autism now than there were before, right? Because I think from just casual conversation, I hear that a lot. When I was a kid, nobody had autism, right? But now, like, there's so much. What's going on? Are we eating something funny? It's funny, this morning I was, in bed scrolling through Reddit, and there was a Reddit post about how the first person diagnosed with autism is still alive. He is 89 years old. So this diagnosis of autism isn't even 100 years old yet. So yes, we are diagnosing more, but it's also very new in terms of us knowing about it. And then ASD, autism spectrum disorder, is more than 3 to 4 times more common among boys than among girls. So it's more common among guys. So guys, if you're like socially awkward, go see a doctor. I'm just kidding. I need to go see a doctor. So here's a comic up on the screen. I'm going to read it for you guys. This is part of the theory of mind. Christy, do not answer if you know the answer. I don't think you do. Based on your other response. I'm just kidding. Sorry. I just talked about being kind. I'm being super mean. All right. There's Sally and Anne at the top, right? That is Sally's basket, and that is Anne's box. Sally puts her red ball in her basket. Sally goes outside of the room and leaves Anna alone. Anna takes the ball out of the basket and puts it in the box. When Sally comes back, she wants to play with the ball. Where will Sally look for the ball? Where will Sally look for the ball? The basket? How many of you guys say the basket? How many of you guys say the box? Let me read it for you guys one more time, very slowly. Sally, Anne. That's Sally's basket. That's Anne's box. Sally puts the red ball in the basket. Sally goes outside, leaves Anne alone. Pay attention here, guys. Anne takes the ball out of the basket and she puts it in the box. Okay? The ball is in the box. When Sally comes back, she wants the ball. So where does she look? How many guys say in the basket? How many guys say in the box? So Sally, if I were there, I would look in the basket, right? Because that's where Sally put it. We all understand, right? Sally, like we can understand Sally's perspective. So this is a study called The Theory of Mind with Sally and Anne. It was done by psychologists Barron and Cohen. 23 of 27 clinically unimpaired children were able to answer it correctly. They would check the box. So students who are normal would check the basket. 12 of 14 children with Down syndrome would check the basket. They can understand this. Now, 4 out of 20 children with autism will answer this incorrectly. They will check the box because students with autism cannot understand Sally's perspective. They cannot take her perspective. The facts are there. The ball is in the box, so check the box, right? That is what they're saying. They cannot take the perspective of somebody else. It is very difficult for them. Now, this isn't like a hard and fast rule. Okay, don't go to your student with autism and be like, hey, answer this question for me, right? Don't do that. But generally speaking, it shows how their brains operate. It is difficult for them to understand another person's perspective. Okay, this is a student by the name of Erin Burnett. She's a Christian with autism. She has her MDiv, and I think she just finished her THM at the University of Glasgow. I don't know her personally. I just read a blog, and she did a talk on YouTube. But she says, in the Bible, Christians are instructed to love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. Luke chapter 10, verse 27. But what if your mind works differently? One thing I have always struggled with is the idea of having a personal relationship with Jesus. I thought I was alone in feeling like this. Perhaps I was just a terrible Christian. And then later on in that same article, the most difficult aspect of social impairment for autistic people is that they sincerely want to have friends, but lack the skills required to make and keep them. So another, I don't know who this is attributed to, but a person with autism said, if sometimes it feels like everyone in life has been given a social playbook, a playbook on how to interact with other humans, except for me. And that's how they feel. And so I think we as a church have a responsibility to these students to help them not feel lonely, help them feel included, a part of our community, a part of our body. So how can we do that? In a ministry context, create a clear and consistent routine, right? And I think we already do that as a church. We have call to worship, praise, offering, announcements, sermon time, and then response small group, right? That's just a junior high schedule. So most of us at church already do that. And then once a month, I think in Chewy and maybe in CHK2, you guys have your store, right? So there is a clear and consistent routine. I think it would be great if we could have that actually written out and displayed every single Sunday for our students. That would be like the next step, just so everyone knows. Now, there are some Sundays where that routine is going to break, right? We have events, we have Easter, we have VBS. If a routine is about to break that Sunday, we call it priming them. It basically just means preparing them. Let them know, hey, John, I know usually our routine is this, this, and this, but today, after this, we're going to do this instead. It's going to be different, right? Just let them know so that they can mentally and emotionally prepare themselves for that, okay? Does that mean it's going to work every single time? No, okay? But at least it can mitigate that, right? Consider sensory experiences, right? Are we doing anything that might cause someone to have their senses overloaded with lights, with sounds, with smell, with touch, right? Thank God our church kind of fixed our smell problem, right? But so that's like one less thing for kids to worry about. But like do we have strobe lights going off during worship, right? Is there going to be smoke during VBS or whatnot, right? Is the music too loud, right? Or is there too many, discontinent sounds going on? Let's take that into consideration, right? I'm not saying we do away with worship. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm saying, like, is there something we can tweak here and there, just so that we can accommodate students with autism a little bit more? Provide structured or semi-structured activities where students have prepared responses. So small group, where you have questions and answers, very structured, right? Everybody knows what to expect. But when it comes to certain games, there are games that have responses already baked into it. Rock, paper, scissors, right? You only have 3 choices. And so games like that, board games, crafts where we explain it for them and they know. And then finally, provide clear expectations and choices, right? Again, junior high, we just started doing this. We've written out expectations for our students, mostly just to get rid of their phones during service. But there are other expectations that we have, and we post it on our screen just like this right before worship starts, right? And so as kids walk in before a call to worship, it's up there. Whether kids read it or not, it doesn't matter. It's up there. They see it, and if they want to read it, they can read it. But that's one way we can hold students who are disrupting accountable. Hey, you saw we have expectations. You read that, right? Oh, no, I didn't. Well, read it next time, right? It's up there. And so those are just ways we can keep students accountable. Give them choices, right? In education, we give kids choices. Usually, the kids don't get to do what they want. They get to do what I want. But I just make them think that they're choosing what they want to do. For example, a kid at school might be like, oh, Mr. Che, I don't want to do anything. I just want to play Roblox on my Chromebook, right? Well, we don't have Roblox. I just want to watch YouTube, right? Okay, you can give me 5 minutes of work, and then you can watch YouTube for another 5 minutes. Or you can give me 10 minutes of work, and you could watch YouTube for 5 minutes. It doesn't matter. He's probably going to choose the 5 minutes if he's a smart kid, right? Because less work, but equal amount. But I'm still getting 5 minutes of work from him, right? And he thinks, oh, I get to choose what I want to do, right? So it's manipulation a little bit, but you're still giving them choices, 2, maybe 3 at the most, to do something, but then you're still clear about what you want, right? So let's say a student wants to leave the room, okay, like because they're getting sensory overloaded, you can take a walk for 5 minutes and come back. Or you can take a walk and just stand right by the doorway, right, of the ministry room. It's a choice, but at the end of the day, they're still a part of it. So that takes a little bit of practice, but that's something you can do. This is also stuff we should be doing for all of our students anyway, not just students with autism. This just helps all students, all kids. Next is how we can support students in a personal context. But before we do that, I'm going to ask you guys to do something for me. You're going to find a partner, okay? Find a partner. And you're going to make 2 lines for me. 1 line across the wall over there, and 1 line just right here along this side. And you guys will be facing each other, right? So partner up with somebody, and one set of partners on this side, and your partner across from you on this side. All right? So go ahead. It's not a game. It's not competitive. Just find a partner, and Pastor Simon is going to help. You guys don't have to stand that close. This line, come all the way to these tables right here, okay? Don't worry, you guys will be standing that close very soon.
We'll stand there and show.
Yeah. All right. If we need more space, we can scoot down this way a little bit. All right. Here we go. Pastor Simon and I are going to demonstrate first, and then when I say go, you guys will do the same exact thing, okay? What's going to happen is the people on this side, they're going to walk. Don't walk too fast, okay? Just walk towards your partner in front of you, okay? This side, once you start feeling uncomfortable, don't use your words. Use body language to tell them to stop, okay? So Pastor Simon, if you want to demonstrate, go ahead. Okay, just right there, just like that, okay? That's it. Simple enough, right? Okay, just give them a non-verbal cue to tell them to stop, all right? Here we go. Ready? Go. Okay, Stop. Everybody hold it. Do not move from where you are. Look around. Look around. What are... Oh, Adam. Christy is all right. What are some things you guys know? Just raise your hand or shout it out. What is something you guys notice about our lines? There's variation. Different genders affect, right? Anything else affects how close we might be to the other person? Or how far? How well you know them? Okay. What else? Is there anything else? I know we're all like mostly Korean in this room, but would culture play a part too? Yeah? Okay. Anything else? Sorry, Dang. Oh, and Elder Daniel. All right, let's reset. Everybody on this side, back. All right. Candace, do me a favor. Can you go all the way to the end? And everybody scoot down one. I'm going to do it again. Everybody scoot down one. So your partner will switch. We're going to try it again. All right? All right? All right, now, same idea. This side is going to walk. When you feel uncomfortable or 좀 부담되면, non-verbally tell them to stop. Okay? Ready? Go. Okay. So, here's the thing. I just heard something really interesting here. She wants to stop, but the other person told her is not telling her to stop. All right. Anything else? Anybody closer than they were earlier? Yeah? Okay. Anybody further than they were earlier? Yeah? Okay. All right. Stay right where you guys are. I have one more thing for you guys, okay? Just stay right there. Do not move. I'm going to set my timer for 20 seconds. Yes, you guys will hold eye contact with the person in front of you without laughing or talking or smiling. As best, I understand it might get a little bit awkward. Without. As best as you can for 20 seconds. Okay? It's long, but it's not that long, right? Let's see how uncomfortable we get. Should I do 30 seconds? 20 seconds? All right, 20 seconds. All right, here we go. Just hold eye contact for 20 seconds. Ready? Go. All right. Thank you, guys. How many of you guys were very uncomfortable holding eye contact? Oh, okay. All right. So, why did we do that? First of all, just even amongst us, our level of comfort with personal space is very different for every human being, right? But what do we do when we talk to kids? We get up in their personal space, right? Especially when they're in trouble, right? What do we do when we talk to kids when they're in trouble? Look at me when I'm talking to you, right? And how that's something I have a hard time with kids too. Even I do that, right? So in a personal setting, right, we need to understand their personal space, right? Also, we just learned with students of autism, they have a hard time with nonverbal and verbal interaction. So if you are invading their personal space, they're not going to know how to say you're invading my personal space, right? They might lash out at you. They might start crying or yelling or screaming, and you're like, oh my gosh, like what did I do, right? And it could be that. So we just got to be mindful of that. We want to be direct. We want to be concrete and specific when conversing with students. When we talk to students, we often say things like, how do you think John felt when you hit him, right? Students with autism, they physically cannot know what John thinks when he hit him, right? It just doesn't happen for them. So we need to be a little bit more concrete. When you hit John, it hurt John and it made John sad, right? We want to be concrete, a little bit more direct, a little bit more specific. You want to check for understanding. Make sure the student understood what you said. Ask them to repeat it back for you, repeat it back to you. This is really hard for me. Don't demand eye contact from kids. I catch myself saying that to kids all the time. If they don't give it to you, like, it's not the end of the world, right? They're probably still listening. And a lot of times students will assume, students with autism, their understanding of time, it's really like, it fluctuates. So sometimes they'll start a story in the middle, thinking you already know everything that happened before. So you might have to ask questions you might have to check for your own understanding, ask questions of clarification, and really just try to understand them as best as possible. Listen to them, right? In the book of Matthew, chapter 25, verse 31 to 40, this is when Jesus is talking about when he returns, he's going to separate, the sheep from the goats. And then they say, how do we know that we clothed you, we gave you some new drink, we visited you in prison? And then Jesus said, truly I say to you, as you did it for the one of the least of these, my brothers, you did it for me, right? And so for us, as human beings, we, as people, even though we might have a theology that all men, all children, all women, everyone, all human beings are created in God's likeness and image, I think in our own sinfulness, in our own weakness, we still consider them less than us, right? Disabled. It's baked into the word. They're less able than us. But Jesus commands us, do for the least of these amongst us, right? And I'm just going to end back with this comic, right? They need a friend. They're lonely. Nobody understands them, or a lot of people don't understand them. At school, everyone, I don't want to say all teachers, but gen ed teachers, this kid is so hard to work with. Why can't he just be in a special ed classroom, right? Everybody wants to kick him out. I feel like as a church, what if we just brought them in, right? If we showed them a little kindness, if we just listened to them and loved them a little bit more, did a little bit more on our part to understand them just a little bit. And I think God's kingdom would grow, and I think we ourselves as our church would be so blessed by students with disabilities. So thank you guys. That was it for me. And thank you.